Island Syndrome. Welcome, guys, once again to the channel Ranking Dinosaurs, where we ranked, you guessed it, dinosaurs. But today we're not going to be only looking at dinosaurs, we're going to be looking at a certain group of animals that share a similar characteristic, and that is the Island Syndrome. Now, this can, manifest in a couple of ways. One of them would be island gigantism, which is when, smaller animals tend to get a little bit bigger. So, since they don't have that much competition in this particular, long, smaller area, these guys can get, much larger to, get to those resources since there's not too much competition. However, there we also have the example of island dwarfism, which is, the contrary, is when big animals tend to get smaller since there's not too many resources in this particular small ecosystem. So, they kind of tend to get a bit smaller in size. So, a lot of these creatures, they span through a lot of million years. So, we're going to be jumping around a bit. But, I didn't want to just talk about, dinosaurs. So, without further ado, I'm going to be starting with PALAEOLOXODON. We're going to be starting in the Middle Pleistocene. This was in the Mediterranean islands of Sicily and Malta, where a very small, in fact, one of the smallest elephants that has ever been discovered lived. And this guy only in height did not surpass the meter tall, which is 3.3 feet, around that size. So these were fully grown animals too. So just to put into perspective that some dogs today are bigger than this than these particular elephants. And yes, I say PALAEOLOXODON, which you might be confused because, funnily enough, PALAEOLOXODON is also one of the, if not the largest elephant that has ever lived. However, this guy is PALAEOLOXODON FALCONERI, which is a distinct species, which is derived from the mainland straight-tusked elephant, which were by that time already in Europe. And this guy in anatomically had some slight differences, like a slightly, relatively speaking, longer neck, as well as having a wider and much more longer torso, I would say. Also, it's possible that this guy might have had a thicker coat of hair, since a much smaller scale, a smaller animal has a faster temperature loss, and in contrast to big elephants that we see today. Also, this island, specifically in Sicily, it coexisted with a couple of different animals that also exhibit this island syndrome, which is the cat-sized dormouse, yes, Lachia, and the actual bully of this island, the giant swan, Cygnus falconeri as well, which is a giant swan. I can think of anything scarier than that. PALAEOLOXODON falconeri. It is an adorable elephant. I wish it was alive today, so we could have petting zoos with these little PALAEOLOXODONs. So I'm gonna comfortably put in an A tier. BALAUR Bondoc. So we're gonna be moving on, and we're actually gonna be going back in time. This time to the late Cretaceous in Romania, where we have a small Peruvian theropod dinosaur. Yes, a dinosaur, which name means it's the stocky dragon. And this actually refers to the great musculature that it possessed. Yes, this little bird-like dinosaur was actually a beast. If you could, in relative to its other, relatives at the time, because, this guy was pretty metal in my opinion, my humble opinion, since this guy also had a large retractable sickle claws. Yes, you remember those from the dromaeosaurs, in both their first and second toes of each foot. Yes, this guy was similar in size to Velociraptor. If you know a Velociraptor, max, 8 feet, 25 meters. And yes, it weighed like, 33 pounds or 15 kilograms. But, gotta remember, these are, smaller animals compared to, your big theropods. So this guy was most likely in those, island hopping through islands in all over Europe. As you know, Lake Cretaceous was, Lake Cretaceous Europe was, just a bunch of archipelagos, if you could say. Um, but going back to Balor, against some other, anatomical features which are cool is that their feet and their legs were, short and much more stocky. And, some examples are of their, I would say, extensive fusion in their limb bones made them much more, robust and made for power instead of, speed, which is, what we associate more with, these small theropods. But no, this guy was, just going toe to toe with its prey, going just full on brawn and leaving the speed for the other guys. So Balaur, I have to say, I am a big fan. I'm a newfound fan of Balaur. That honestly, I think is gonna bump into S tier, yeah, right out of the gate. TETHYSHADROS. So gonna be staying actually in the late Cretaceous, but we're going to Italy again, kind of like PALAEOLOXODON, but this guy is a hadrosaurid. Now, a couple of specimens are very famous from from Italy, and they are two TETHYSHADROS, which were named actually. Yes, they have names. Antonio and Bruno, or if you're Italian, Antonio and Bruno. But the former, Antonio, being a subadult, was only 13 feet or 4 meters, and the latter, Bruno, was a fully grown adult at 15 feet or 4.5 meters. Now, TETHYSHADROS is pretty interesting. This is a very basal hadrosauroid, but its anatomy actually shows that it is an intermediary in nature, as it possesses both, primitive and much more derived features from, much later hadrosaurs. Now, some traits that it evolved are that did not still, that still carried over from, for example, much more basal ornithopods are a shorter neck and a robust and much more boxy skull, kind of like, iguanodon. However, their, for example, hand morphologies resembled that much more of later hadrosaurs, and, still had the arrangement of these teeth batteries, which are, again, a much more common characteristic of hadrosaurs, like Saurolophines and Lambeosaurians. Another cool thing about the fossil is that the keratinous beak was still, it was still intact in the process of fossilization, and you can see it had a pretty weird, comb. Well, I don't know, it had this pointy. I don't know how to describe it. Yeah, like a comb, in the beak, which probably helped it to stripped vegetation that much more efficiently. TETHYSHADROS, I think it's pretty cool. I don't know if it's as cool as PALAEOLOXODON, so I think I'm gonna put it in B tier. ARCHAEOINDRIS. Now we're gonna be going a little bit forward in time and we're gonna be talking about an extinct genus of giant lemur, also known as the largest primate from Madagascar. Yes, I was doing a little bit of research and, some other, another video. I came across ARCHAEOINDRIS, and I have to say, this guy is the reason I decided to make this video. Because I was absolutely flabbergasted when I started reading about this thing. And I saw some pictures, and I'm like, brother, what the heck? So this guy is comparable in size to, yes, hold on to your seats, a gorilla. Now imagine how funny lemurs look today. Now imagine if they were, gorilla-sized. That is absolutely terrifying. So the family of that ARCHAEOINDRIS is a part of are also known as, sloth lemurs, and are related to the current Indris and Sifacas. Shout out to Samumafu. But these guys had a massive and robust skeleton. Their arms were, much longer than their legs. And, size estimates put them at 350 pounds or 160 kilograms. Yes, these are comparable sizes to, actual, fully grown male gorillas today. And sometimes these Archaeoindris are, or in general, sloth lemurs are compared to the extinct ground sloths from North and South America, because they, I don't know if they, I don't think they feel like a similar niche, but they kind of look very similar, at least skeleton wise. However, when we look at their skull, I have to say that is one of the most gnarliest looking skulls I've ever seen. It is absolutely terrifying. They had a wide but very short skull with forward facing eyes directly in front of them. They were most likely folivorous. They ate probably only leaves, and they were still slow moving, but it is also implied that they were tree dwelling as well, so they could get up on those trees if they had the chance. So Archaeoindris, absolutely terrifying. I have to say, it's one of my new favorite extinct mammals. The only thing that rivals it in size, or that we know is bigger in size, is Gigantopithecus. I'm gonna put it in S tier. It's actually surprising. Paludititan. I have to be real with you guys. I was thinking, first of all, when I was getting some dinosaurs from for this specific tier list, the first one that came in mind, and I think the first one that comes to your mind, is actually Magyarosaurus from Hattig Island. Now, I was debating of whether to put Magyarosaurus here because, as you all know, I assume, because if you don't know, I've talked about Magyarosaurus before in my European sauropod tier list. If you haven't checked it out, go take a look if you want to hear my thoughts about Magyarosaurus. Now, my second option was, Europasaurus, which is another very tiny sauropod. Alas, I as well talked about Europasaurus in my European sauropod tier list. So I landed at, well, I didn't land first of all because I was like, oh yeah, well, I guess I'm not going to be talking about sauropods, but I remember there is another. And we've landed at Paludititan. Now, Paludititan is a titanosaurian sauropod that lived, yes, in present-day Romania during the late Cretaceous. And you know what that means? Yes, it lived in the island ecosystem of Hattig. It was a relatively small sauropod, again, kind of like Magyarosaurus and Europasaurus, reaching only 20 feet in length, 6 meters, and only weighing, a ton in body mass, so only. But, we're talking about sauropods here. When it was first described, yes, the authors thought, and, I sympathize with them, that denoted that there was a possibility that this was just, Magyarosaurus, but again. However, there are actually no shared unique traits between Magyarosaurus and Paludititan, and coupled with the fact that Magyarosaurus was actually found in a different location. Still Hattig Island, but, different location. And, there were some, very minimal, but, very important differences between the two. And I have to say, Paludititan, yes, it could have been an actual prey item of the fan favorite of mine, Hatzegopteryx, which was, feasting on all of these guys. So, Paludititan, I was initially going to put in C tier. However, dwarf have a soft spot for, dwarf sauropods. So I'm actually going to put it right here in B tier, very nicely with TETHYSHADROS. The HAAST'S eagle. So we're going to be finishing the tier list with the HAAST'S eagle. Now, this is an extinct species of eagle endemic to the South Island of New Zealand. Yes, so we're going down under, not exactly down under, but you know what I mean. It is the largest eagle to have existed, weighing a whopping 40 pounds or 18 kilograms. Although these guys did not have the largest wingspans, they were actually relatively short, compared to the weight and the size of these guys. It was only like, 10 feet or 3 meters. And this is a great example of island gigantism. And not only because, eagles are, they're not small, but, for an eagle to get big, it would have to need a, very specific reason for that. And yes, that is in response to the size of its prey, which was the flightless moa, which is another example of island gigantism. Actually, island gigantism has very much talked about, well, not exactly island gigantism, but a lot of animals that represent island gigantism in my Xenozoic dinosaur tier list. If you haven't seen that one, check it out. But that is one of the reasons I haven't talked about, Dinornis, Apiornis, all those different animals. But yes, so the HAAST eagle was, preying upon these moas, which were 15 times their weight. That is pretty impressive. They used their, huge talons, robust beaks, so they could, rip out, their internal organs, causing its victims to die most definitely of blood loss. Again, the Maori, which were the people from, New Zealand, the Maori mythology actually had a creature, the Pokai, which was most definitely the HAAST eagle. I mean, I totally get it. If I saw the HAAST eagle in person, I would also offer my firstborn child. So the HAAST eagle is actually going to be legendarily put in A tier. I respect the HAAST eagle for, the hustle. That is going to be the tier list, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you like the video if you like the video about island syndrome, please let me know in the comments if you want a part 2, and what other animals did I forget, because I know I forgot a lot. As I was telling you in the HAAST eagle portion, stuff like Apiornis and Dinornis, I do not want to touch on them again. If you want to see what my thoughts are on those animals, check out the Cenozoic dinosaur tier list. I talk more about them in that video. But that is going to be it for this tier list, guys. Thank you so much. Please, if you want to help the videos, how can you help? Like the video. Helps a lot. Subscribe helps even more. And I will see you guys in the next video.